Public Opinion is in session. I'm Jeremy Cordo, Pete's behind the camera, and welcome and thank you for all your comments and the bits and the pieces. If you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube or wherever else we are, where are we, Pete? We're on various iPod platforms. Too many, I'm told. We've got to thank Andy Martin because he's taken us from the garage and our, I suppose you would call it a narrow cast, to a really broadcast. So if you're part of whatever part of the experience you're in at the moment, thank you. Thank you for being with us. And we've got a new microphone which we are hoping is giving you better signal and without so much interference, which I'm told did annoy a few people. Because we were only using the microphone on the camera, which is just this little tiny condenser thing, which is, some distance away. Anyway, I hope it's all coming through loud and clear at your place. It's the 15th. Happy birthday, happy wedding anniversary. I look back briefly each morning or afternoon, depending on when you're viewing this, at some events in history from which we may learn something. Speaking of YouTube, 2005, YouTube, internet site, the original one, which I suppose is the same one that you may in fact be watching this on right now. You can put videos, and people do put videos and share videos to be viewed by others, and of course oneself as well. Launched on this day in the United States and the world, 2005. Mind you, I personally think YouTube is the best TV channel. It's amazing the stuff that's on YouTube. Truly amazing. The first teddy bear was introduced in America, made by Morris and Rose Mitchum. 1903. The first teddy bear. Adolf Hitler announces the construction of the Volkswagen Beetle, the people's car, he called it. 1936. It pretty much didn't change its shape. Golly, for yonks. Then they took it over to South America when they stopped making it in Germany, and they, I think, kind of wrecked it. I suppose it just never looked like a beetle. Then looked like something else. Nat King Cole, wonderful singer, American jazz pianist and pop vocalist, unforgettable. Mona Lisa was another one. He dies of cancer, smoked all the time, as people did in those days. 1965, he was only 49 years of age. Paul Shirley of Australia. It says here, sucked a lifesaver for 4 hours and 40 minutes. I honestly don't know whether to leave that alone or try and get some more information. 1979, Paul Shirley, 21 of Australia, sucked a lifesaver for 4 hours and 40 minutes. Do you suppose, Pete, do you suppose they mean the lifesavers that you get in the little roll? I would say, it just looks so weird. Could have just left it on his tongue, absolutely. God. Well, that, I think, Paul, was your 15 minutes of fame, because I ain't never heard of you since. Graham Kennedy, Australian actor, king of Australian television, born in Melbourne. He died in 2005, but he was born in 1934. The US performs a nuclear test in Nevada. That was in 1962. That would have been the very first one, I guess. Although the one that gave birth to the atomic bomb, that was in... Where was that? That was in Alamogordo in Melbourne, in Mexico, wasn't it? Or New Mexico. I must look that up. 1988, the US performs nuclear test site again at Nevada. Don't know what happened between 62 and 88. Charles Lewis Tiffany, the American jeweler and founder of Tiffany and Company, born in Kingley, Connecticut on this day in 1902. Wartime propaganda poster, 1943. I think I have it somewhere. I've got a lot of wartime propaganda posters in here. I don't know why I find them interesting. I don't know. But this one said, a very famous one apparently, "We can do it! We can do it!" Produced by J. Howard Miller and posted on the walls of Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company plants in the Midwest, and it became one of the most famous depictions of World War II. That was in 1943. And all Mr. Westinghouse was trying to do was say to his workers, we can do it. We got a very big part of doing it, in fact. Westinghouse, indeed. 1952, King George VI is buried in St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle in England. The father of the late Queen. 1952, John Lennon passes his driving test in 1965. 1971, after 1,200 years, Great Britain abandons pence and shillings to adopt decimal currency. If you've stood by something and something has stood by you for 1,200 years, why would you? I don't know. That was 1971. Soviet military occupies Afghanistan. Well, they ended their occupation on this day in 1989. Cesar Romero, the American actor. Batman. Oh yeah. Ocean's 11. He was in Ocean's 11. Born in New York City in when was he born? 1907. And he died in 1994. Ethel Merman, Academy Award-winning stage and screen actress, no business like show business. She dies of brain cancer at the age of 76. She was also in It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, which of course it is. 1984 was the year. Melissa Manchester, the American pop singer. Don't Cry Out Loud and Midnight Blue, which is a particularly lovely song, Midnight Blue. Born in the Bronx in New York City, 1951. One more. 2020, Beijing orders people returning to the city after the Lunar New Year holiday to self-quarantine for 14 days to prevent the spread of COVID. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. And we haven't heard the last of that awful thing yet either. Speaking of health, an inconvenient truth, ladies and gentlemen. The Grattan Institute, often quoted by the ABC, a considerable, what could I say, authority, think tank, left-leaning, but very, very credible, has let the cat out of the bag. They announced some interesting facts and figures about health and the problems that we're all too familiar with regard to Medicare. All this talk about problems with general practice, the GP, how when they say that per head of population, now this is the Grattan Institute. It was on the ABC. The bloke who was doing the interview did not follow up with a question, which he should have. How can they say that we have a problem with general practice when per head of population, according to the Grattan Institute, we have more general practitioners than we did 40 years ago? 40 years ago? And we have more general practitioners than most comparable countries. And we have more general practitioners than more. See, you'd have imagined, wouldn't you, that the journalists would have jumped on that immediately? It tells me loud and clear that people must be going to the doctor unnecessarily. And then, of course, sending us, the taxpayer, the bill. Well, why not? If somebody isn't paying, he's not going to be too aware or too conscious of the financial consequences of his actions. That's not to say people should not go to the doctor if they feel sick. But anyway, socialised medicine. This no one pays nonsense, I believe, to be the root cause of all of the trouble. It doesn't work, and here's an interesting fun fact. We are pumping out from our universities at an amazing rate. We are pumping out, particularly after COVID, because the foreign students are flying back into the country. Medicine, these are the faculties of medicine and dentistry. We are pumping out an enormous number of graduates. Yet they will still tell us that we have a problem. The universities, medicine and dentistry faculties are huge money earners for tertiary institutions. How could we possibly be short of doctors? It doesn't make any sense. Would somebody care to follow that up with the Grattan Institute? I know I was talking to you a couple of days ago about Paramount, the owners of Channel 10, swinging the axe. And if you've listened to me before on the subject, you'll know that I've said that for many years the programs on Channel 10 should not have been put to air, nor should they have probably gone into production. It's like a hit program is like a hit record. They have in the recording industry people called A&R men, artists and repertoire people, whose job it is to spot a hit, to know a hit when he or she hears it. Must be like being a connoisseur tasting wine and knowing when it's great and when it's just so-so. You know what I mean? Clearly the television industry does not have an equivalent of an A&R man or woman. A hit or a miss. Anyway, I think they're in the wrong business. I won't go through all the crappy shows that they shouldn't have broadcast, but this gets my goat. All of these decisions are made, of course, in Sydney and Melbourne. And yes, 10 probably have to do something about the predicament that I've been talking about here on this Court of Public Opinion program for probably, Pete, how long would it be? I don't know. 12 months? Long time. Anyway, they come to town, to Adelaide, and they sack Frank Filosi, the general manager here in Adelaide of Channel 10. He's been with 10 for 37 years. None of these terrible decisions were made by him. They were all made interstate. Maybe he should have stood up to them and told them that they were crap or crappy programs, but maybe he did. I don't know. Maybe he did. You would have seen the promotion, one of the new ones that they're doing, for their new look News at 5 on Channel 10 with Kate Fairbairn. These people should realise that Adelaide cannot be conned into believing that this News at 5 is Adelaide. It's coming from Sydney, broadcast out of Sydney. And if you really think we're going to sit here and watch a news service when there are two other alternatives, 3 counting the ABC, that's very dumb. You're wasting money. I grew up in Adelaide. The promo goes, I do all my shopping at the Central Market. I went to school in Adelaide. I mean, this is all very wonderful, but you can't convince me that... Why not just do the news from Adelaide? Don't do it from Sydney and pretend you're loyal, parochial, passionate people of Adelaide. Doesn't make any sense. I think the problem is they've got accountants running the radio and television industry in Australia. Mind you, I think a lot of them, television and radio, they would love to be able to just broadcast out of Sydney, all over Australia. Save a lot of money. Just have repeater stations. Yeah. All comes down to decisions based on the balance sheet. Not anything unusual about that, I suppose. But for example, if you look at radio, they have kind of little token programs. Maybe one program a day comes out of Adelaide, a lot of them. They just sort of have networked programs and pretend they're local. And the technology is so clever they can intersperse local promos and local ads. And, you know, I suppose if you're not particularly savvy about things like that, it's not going to really bother you. But if you work in the industry, of course it does, because it means that there is no local support for the local people. Disgraceful, I think. Nobody really calls it out, except, of course, for the court of public opinion. How do we fix it? Well, you and I should always demand that our radio and television should be prominently South Australia. A lot of these people beat that chest and talk about local production, but what they're talking about is local production out of Sydney and Melbourne. Now that's not right. Not right. They used to say, you know, that the Greens were like watermelons. They were green on the outside and red on the inside. I've heard that more than once. Now, these days, I don't think they're even green on the outside. Let me explain. They're supposed to be all for the environment. The Greens, all for the environment. As I've said before, I'll give you an example. Of the 480 million tonnes of CO2 that we in Australia contribute to global emissions, almost half of that is absorbed by our grasslands and forests. You would think, wouldn't you, that this would be right up the alley of the Greens. Right up the alley. If the Holy Grail is zero emissions by 2050, and most people seem to agree that that's what we want to do, or what we should do, all we would have to do between now and then is simply double our grasslands and forests. That's all. And we would be net zero probably well before 2050. We wouldn't have to interfere with electricity prices and drive them up to the point where everything is more expensive, because electricity prices are a great multiplier, affecting most everything we do and everywhere we go and every object we buy. We wouldn't be putting people out of work, turning the economy upside down, closing down factories. We would just be, in a very lovely green sense, just planting trees, doubling our forests and grasslands. Problem fixed. But you see, no. It's the turning the economy upside down that they're interested in, not the emissions. Turning the country upside down. And that's where, ladies and gentlemen, the Greens are red. I don't know, have I got time for one more? I had a kind of epiphany the other day. I was driving down the street and I saw a Muslim family, which was mum and dad, 4 daughters, walking in an orderly way, the daughters behind their mum and dad. All the girls had hijabs on. A lot of order and discipline here, I think, within that family, just as an observation. But the hijab, of course, is the thing that people are willing to die for the right to take off, or for at least the right to have the freedom to choose. Anyway, on the same day, I find myself in Rundle Mall. Rundle Mall, the main shopping precinct here in Adelaide. I walked down the mall. It was a hot day. It was a beautiful day. But I really felt I was on another planet. Somehow it looked like a scene from a movie. Quite surreal. Maybe the bar scene out of Star Wars, if ever you've seen that. Do you see that, Pete? Don't. Something out of a Mad Max movie, maybe. There were half-dressed women with pink and purple and green and orange hair, tattoos, some with shaved heads, and the men looked even more strange. I was careful not to stare because my mother always said it was rude to stare. But I just kind of got the feeling that that's probably what they wanted me to do. Because you wouldn't look like that if you didn't want to get noticed. There were some with mohawks, strange patterns of things cut through their hair, rings, chains in their ears and their nose, I don't know. A freak show, and as I said, it's sort of a Mad Max movie. This is midday on Friday afternoon last here in Adelaide. How any of these people could get a job looking like that, I don't know. I'm not normally so judgmental. Live and let live. That's me. But then I thought back to that Muslim family that I had driven past on the way into town. And I thought, what would these very conservative people make of what I just saw? And how would Mum and Dad handle it if the kids ever came home looking like that? I know I'm traditional, I know I'm probably even old-fashioned, but I'm afraid I look around and I see insanity masquerading as normalcy in a place like Rundle Mall in a major city like Adelaide. Now, I'm not talking about the Muslim family. I don't know. Some people would look at the Muslim family and say they were extraordinary, or in some sense extreme. Well, I can tell you they haven't, people who might say that haven't seen Rundle Mall on a Friday afternoon. As I say, it was an interesting experience that I wanted to make mention to you. Certainly made me think. Anyway, thank you very much for being with us. Tomorrow we'll be back with the Court of Public Opinion again. Here in the garage, I'm Jeremy Cordeaux. Believe in yourself. And Pete and I wish you a very happy day.